It was Wednesday, November 29th, 2006, a date etched in the memory of anyone who witnessed the horrifying events that unfolded at SeaWorld San Diego's Shamu Stadium. Picture this: the Southern California sun, a crisp, late autumn breeze, and the electric anticipation humming through a packed arena. The Believe show, a dazzling spectacle of marine mastery, was about to begin. Ken Peters, a seasoned trainer with years of experience under his belt, stood poised at the edge of the enormous performance pool. He was a picture of calm professionalism. Clad in his familiar wetsuit, microphone headset in place. He'd done this routine countless times, a seamless dance between man and beast, a testament to the bond forged through years of dedicated training. Across from him, gliding silently beneath the shimmering surface, was Kasatka, a formidable orca, a matriarch, a creature of immense power and intelligence. At over 17 feet long and weighing in excess of 5,000 pounds, she commanded attention effortlessly. Captured off the coast of Iceland as a young calf, she had spent the majority of her life in captivity, becoming one of SeaWorld's star attractions. The show was built on a foundation of trust, a carefully constructed illusion of harmony between human and animal. The music swelled, an upbeat melody designed to amplify the excitement. The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of sound that washed over the stadium. Peters took a deep breath, his gaze locking with Kasatka's. He knew her rhythms, her nuances, her subtle shifts in mood. Or so he thought. He plunged into the water, the cool embrace a familiar sensation. He swam alongside Kasatka, their movements synchronized, a graceful ballet in the deep blue. On cue, the majestic orca rose from the depths, effortlessly lifting Ken onto her broad back. They executed a flawless dive, a breathtaking display of athleticism and coordination to the audience. It was pure magic, a moment of awe-inspiring connection. To Ken, it was another performance, a routine he had perfected over years of dedication. But beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect partnership, something was amiss, something that no one could have foreseen. As Peters floated calmly beside Kasatka, preparing for the next segment of the show, a subtle shift occurred, a barely perceptible hesitation in her movements, a slight twitch of her powerful pectoral fin. Her calf, Kalia, was in the adjacent pool, vocalizing with increasing intensity. The sounds were sharp, insistent, a mother's call. Perhaps it was the heightened excitement of the crowd, the pulsing music, or the specific tone of Kalia's calls. Whatever the trigger, Kasatka's maternal instincts had been activated, her protective instincts surging to the forefront. Then, without warning, Kasatka began to sink, slowly at first, deliberately, controlled. Peters, ever vigilant, moved with her, anticipating her actions, ready to respond to any change in her behavior. But before he could adjust, before he could issue a hand command or attempt to swim free, Kasatka lunged with terrifying speed and force. She clamped her massive jaws around Ken's left foot. The audience gasped, a collective intake of breath that filled the stadium. The music screeched to a halt, the upbeat melody replaced by a stunned silence. Below the surface, chaos erupted. The water churned, visibility vanished in a cloud of bubbles and foam. Kasatka drove downward, pulling Ken with her into the depths of the main performance pool. The grip on his foot was firm, crushing, tight enough to inflict excruciating pain and leave deep lacerations, but not quite enough to shatter bone. The message was clear. Kasatka was in control, trapped in her powerful jaws. Ken was plunged into a world of cold, disorienting darkness. He was twisted and turned, dragged deeper and deeper into the pool's murky abyss. He knew he couldn't fight her, not without risking a catastrophic reaction, a potentially fatal escalation. His only option was to remain calm, to conserve his energy, and to try to anticipate her next move. After what seemed like an eternity, Kasatka resurfaced, just long enough for Ken to gasp for a precious lungful of air. The crowd, still unsure whether this was part of the act, erupted in nervous chatter, a mixture of confusion and apprehension, but the respite was fleeting. Without warning, Kasatka plunged back down, this time even deeper and faster than before. Ken's body thrashed behind her, helpless, dragged through the water like a ragdoll in the grip of an unstoppable force at the pool's edge. Backup trainers scrambled into action, their faces etched with panic. They knew this wasn't a miscue, a moment of defiance, or a simple mistake. This was a full-blown rejection of control, a deliberate act of aggression. They grabbed emergency tools, nets, poles, water hoses, and began slapping the surface of the water, creating a jarring cacophony of noise. They hoped to distract Kasatka, to break her hold, to somehow regain control of the situation. But nothing worked. Kasatka resurfaced again, only for a brief moment. Ken, his body battered and exhausted, managed to lift his hand above the waterline, signaling that he was still conscious, still alive. Then, without hesitation, she plunged back down, dragging him into the depths once more. According to internal SeaWorld logs, later revealed during legal proceedings, Kasatka held Ken underwater, repeatedly for intervals approaching 60 seconds or more. Each forced ascent pushed him closer to his physical limits, each brief moment at the surface barely enough to replenish his oxygen-starved lungs. The audience was no longer confused. The smiles had vanished, replaced by expressions of horror and disbelief. Children began to cry, their innocent faces reflecting the terror of the unfolding scene. Gasps and whispers echoed through the stands. Someone screamed. Trainers shouted into their radios, desperately activating the emergency response protocol. But no one entered the water. Protocol dictated that no one was to intervene directly. This was Ken's fight alone. Kasatka continued her relentless assault, circling the pool, tightening her grip on Ken's foot, dragging him through the water like a prized possession. She refused to relinquish her hold. His lungs burned, his ears rang, his wetsuit filled with cold, chlorinated water. Each second below the surface was a desperate race between instinct and oxygen, and Kasatka showed no signs of stopping. From the stands of Shamu Stadium, what had begun as a mesmerizing display of harmony between man and beast had devolved into a slow, surreal nightmare. The picture of harmony was shattered, replaced by the terrifying reality of a predator asserting its dominance. Let's dive into the complex story of Kasatka, the orca at the center of this harrowing event. To truly understand what happened on that day in November, we need to look beyond the surface, past the dazzling performances and into the whale herself. Kasatka's story begins not in the bright lights of SeaWorld, but in the frigid waters off the coast of Iceland. Captured in 1978 at just 2 years old, she was ripped from her family and thrust into a world of concrete tanks and human interaction. This forced separation, this violent removal from her natural environment, is the first crucial piece of the puzzle. Imagine being taken from your home, your family, everything you know, and being confined to a small space with strangers. The psychological impact would be devastating. Now, amplify that by the intelligence and social complexity of an orca. Orcas, or killer whales, aren't just large dolphins. They are apex predators with intricate social structures, complex communication, and a deep emotional capacity. They live in tightly knit family groups called pods, each with its own unique culture and dialect. These pods stay together for life, hunting, playing, and supporting each other. The bond between mother and calf is particularly strong, lasting a lifetime in the wild. In captivity, these natural instincts are suppressed. These social bonds are shattered. Orcas are forced to live in artificial groupings, often with individuals they would never associate with in the wild. They are trained to perform unnatural behaviors for food, their lives reduced to a series of tricks and routines. The vast ocean, their natural playground, is replaced by a confined tank, offering little mental or physical stimulation. So what does this do to an animal like Kasatka? The answer, tragically, is that it creates a powder keg of frustration, stress, and suppressed aggression. Imagine the constant cacophony of the park, the music, the cheering crowds, the artificial lights, all assaulting her sensitive senses. Then, factor in the rigid training schedules, the forced interactions with humans, and the lack of control over her own life. It's a recipe for disaster. Now, let's examine Kasatka's specific history within SeaWorld. While she was known for her intelligence and responsiveness, internal records paint a more nuanced picture. There were documented incidents of aggression, refusals to follow commands, and what trainers delicately referred to as unpredictable behavior. She was a dominant whale, asserting her authority within the artificial social structure of the tank. Some trainers noted that she was particularly agitated when separated from her calves, highlighting the enduring strength of her maternal instincts despite years in captivity. One key factor that likely contributed to the attack on Ken Peters was the presence of her calf, Kalia, in the adjacent pool during the show. Maternal protectiveness is a powerful force in orcas, and any perceived threat to her offspring could trigger a violent response. The sounds of the crowd, the music, even Ken's presence in the water could have been interpreted as a danger to Kalia, prompting Kasatka to act. It's also crucial to consider the concept of learned helplessness. Orcas in captivity are often subjected to aversive training methods, where they are punished for not performing the desired behaviors. This can lead to a state of learned helplessness, where the animal gives up trying to control its environment and becomes passive and withdrawn. However, this doesn't mean the underlying frustration and aggression disappear. Instead, it festers beneath the surface, waiting for a trigger to erupt. Think of it like a pressure cooker. The lid is tightly sealed, and the heat is constantly rising. Eventually, the pressure becomes too much, and the cooker explodes. In Kasatka's case, the pressure of captivity, the stress of performance, and the perceived threat to her calf all combined to create the perfect storm. The attack on Ken Peters wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the culmination of years of confinement, stress, and suppressed instincts. It was a tragic consequence of forcing a wild animal to live a life that is fundamentally unnatural. The truth is, we often anthropomorphize animals, projecting human emotions and motivations onto their behavior. We want to believe that Kasatka and Ken Peters had a special bond, a connection based on trust and affection. And perhaps, to some extent, that was true. But we can't forget that Kasatka was still a wild animal, a powerful apex predator with instincts that run deep. Ultimately, the story of Kasatka serves as a stark reminder of the ethical complexities of keeping orcas in captivity. It forces us to confront the question of whether the entertainment value of these shows outweighs the immense suffering and psychological damage inflicted on these intelligent, social creatures. It challenges us to reevaluate our relationship with the natural world and to consider the true cost of our desire to control and confine it. The aftermath of Ken Peters' near-fatal encounter with Kasatka sent shockwaves that reverberated far beyond the walls of SeaWorld San Diego. What initially seemed like a horrifying anomaly quickly unraveled into a complex web of legal battles, industry scrutiny, and lasting change. The attack became a pivotal moment, forcing a reckoning with the ethical and safety concerns surrounding orca captivity. Immediately following the incident, SeaWorld launched its own internal investigation. Naturally, they needed to understand what went wrong, what led to Kasatka's sudden aggression, and how to prevent such an event from ever happening again. But the investigation felt less like a genuine quest for answers and more like damage control to many, particularly in light of what came to light later. While SeaWorld's internal probe unfolded, another, far more significant investigation was brewing. The U.S. Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, stepped in, launching a formal inquiry into SeaWorld's safety practices and the risks inherent in working with killer whales. This wasn't just about one incident. It was about the systemic issues that might have contributed to it. The OSHA investigation was a game changer. It pulled back the curtain on SeaWorld's internal records, revealing a history of incidents, behavioral anomalies, and trainer concerns that had previously been kept out of the public eye. Kasatka, it turned out, had a documented history of unpredictable behavior, instances of aggression, and signs of stress. This wasn't a rogue orca. She was an animal struggling within the confines of captivity, and these struggles were manifesting in increasingly dangerous ways. The star piece of evidence that OSHA produced was the very footage of the attack on Ken Peters. For years, SeaWorld had kept this video under wraps, understandably. But in the hands of OSHA, it became a damning indictment of the park's safety protocols. The video, replayed in courtrooms and scrutinized frame by frame, painted a vivid picture of the dangers trainers faced, the inadequacy of existing safety measures, and the potential for catastrophic consequences. The ensuing legal battle between OSHA and SeaWorld was fierce and protracted. SeaWorld argued that the attack was an isolated incident, an unforeseen consequence of working with complex, intelligent animals. They maintained that they had taken reasonable precautions to ensure trainer safety and that the risks were inherent in the nature of the work. OSHA countered that SeaWorld had willfully disregarded known hazards, failed to adequately protect its trainers, and created a workplace environment that was inherently dangerous. They pointed to Kasatka's history of aggression, the lack of physical barriers between trainers and orcas during waterwork, and the company's reluctance to acknowledge the psychological toll of captivity on these animals. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, captivating the public and generating intense media coverage. Former trainers came forward to testify, sharing their own experiences and raising concerns about the safety protocols and the well-being of the orcas. Experts weighed in on the psychological effects of captivity, the ethical implications of keeping these intelligent creatures in tanks, and the potential for unpredictable behavior. Finally, in 2011, a judge issued a landmark ruling. SeaWorld was found to have willfully violated workplace safety laws and was hit with a $75,000 fine, a relatively small amount for a company of SeaWorld's size. but a significant symbolic victory for OSHA. More importantly, the ruling imposed strict new safety regulations, effectively prohibiting unprotected waterwork between trainers and orcas. This meant no more swimming with the whales, no more riding on their backs, no more close contact interactions without physical barriers. The immediate impact of the ruling was palpable. SeaWorld was forced to revamp its shows, eliminate waterwork routines, and implement new safety protocols. The trainers, many of whom had dedicated their lives to working with orcas, were devastated. They had lost the close connection they had once shared with the animals, the thrill of performing alongside them in the water. The magic of the Shamu show, a staple of SeaWorld for decades, was gone, replaced by a more distant, controlled performance. But the long-term consequences of the attack and the subsequent legal battle were even more profound. The incident served as a catalyst for a broader public debate about the ethics of orca captivity. Animal rights organizations seized on the case, using it as ammunition in their campaign to end the practice altogether. Documentaries like Blackfish, released in 2013, further fueled the controversy, presenting a damning indictment of SeaWorld's treatment of orcas and highlighting the psychological toll of captivity. Public opinion began to shift dramatically. Attendance at SeaWorld parks declined, protests erupted outside their gates, and celebrities voiced their opposition to orca captivity. The company faced mounting pressure from shareholders, lawmakers, and the general public to change its ways. In 2016, SeaWorld finally bowed to the pressure. They announced the end of their captive orca breeding program, effectively signaling the end of the era of orca shows. They pledged to phase out theatrical performances and focus on more educational and conservation-oriented programs. It was a momentous victory for animal rights advocates, a testament to the power of public opinion, and a recognition of the evolving understanding of animal welfare. The attack on Ken Peters, though a tragic event, ultimately served as a turning point in the history of marine parks. It forced a reckoning with the ethical and safety concerns surrounding orca captivity, leading to significant changes in industry practices and a growing public awareness of the psychological toll of keeping these intelligent creatures in tanks. While the scars of that day may never fully fade, the legacy of the attack is a more humane and ethical approach to the treatment of orcas in captivity. The $75,000 fine was ultimately a small price to pay for the seismic shift it triggered. It's a price SeaWorld continues to pay to this day in lost revenue and a damaged reputation. And it all started with one horrifying moment in a seemingly perfect show.